Hey everyone, Andrew and Adam here with It Takes Two Takes. We are going to talk about the movie Palm Springs. Palm Springs is a movie that came out as a Hulu original. It's very popular. Sundance picked it up for 15 million and made headlines back in January until COVID destroyed any news about it. But here it is. Before we get into any details or spoilers, what I want to do is talk about our general thoughts about the movie. Adam, let's start with you. Tell me your overall thoughts of Palm Springs.
It was a fun story. I thought it was a little bit, different. Obviously, other movies have played, as far as rom-coms have played with time before. So they did a little bit different as far as this concept of people being stuck in a time loop. I mean, it's kind of a Groundhog Day. So obviously the approach for getting out of it was a bit different than some of the others. But there were certain parts that I think I probably overthought a bit, I admit. But it was a fun movie. Didn't It kept my interest. I enjoyed it for the most part.
Now, before you talk about the things that you were overthinking, because I'm sure that's going to be going into the more detailed spoilery
Spoiler, yeah,
territory,
absolutely.
it was entertaining. I thought it was very, very funny, very well written. I felt like it was a very tight 90 minutes. It was just nonstop laughs. Rom-com, I don't even know. It's fair to throw in that genre, but I feel like it's a much more raunchy sort of take on the rom-com genre.
I mean, there were definitely raunchy parts to it, which I expected with Andy Samberg. And since it was, it starred Andy Samberg, it was rated R. I expected it to go into some raunch. I can't say it was, I was laughing throughout. There was only probably a handful of times I was truly, literally laughing out loud. I enjoyed it, but I don't think I got. It doesn't sound like I got as much out of it as you did. Now, I admit, I think there is a big component of it is I'm not an Andy Samberg fan. I'm
Fine.
okay with them sometimes as like supporting characters and thrown in, but I've never been. I don't know what it is about his personality or the way he delivers things. That was probably playing a little bit of my bias on him.
I enjoyed Lonely Island, their productions. This technically would qualify as one of those, and Andy Samberg, of course, is the leading, one of the leading stars in this movie, right? I don't know that to me it was a true what I would consider an Andy Samberg performance over the last decade plus of every movie that he's been doing, particularly the Lonely Island related films.
Well,
So
and
I want to put that out there for anyone that's going into this wondering.
I think I read that himself and Lonely Island, the people involved from Lonely Island, came in on this after this wasn't their beginning production, right? They were brought in later on.
That's right.
So that's why I think it's not, it doesn't feel as much like a true Lonely Island, which is fine. Because I didn't like Pop Star. The Pop Star movie they did.
Yep.
I like some of the SNL stuff they did, but again, that
Right.
goes into that whole small doses bit. And I admit I've never watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's been on for years. It apparently is quite popular.
There's a much more exaggerated character in Brooklyn Nine-Nine for what it's
Right.
worth.
But
And the same thing would apply to Hot Rod and MacGruber. Well, he wasn't in.
and I didn't
Yeah.
like, and though the whole movie there was lots of problems. I didn't like That's My Boy with either. His character in that I was not a fan of. He was trying to play a straight character through that, which I don't think really worked. So it's one of those things where I had problems with this movie. I wasn't actually going to even watch the movie to begin with because it starred Andy Samberg. It wasn't until you
Wow.
said you really enjoyed it, you liked it, that I'm
I
like,
did.
right. And I'm like, well, all right, I'll give this a shot and see what my opinion is. Maybe I'm just, maybe I'll be wrong. And I enjoyed the film. Don't get me wrong. I'm still not an Andy Samberg fan. I definitely don't think he will draw me into a movie. So his next project, I don't know, is going to draw me in. But
But it's not an I wouldn't call it an Andy Samberg film, to be fair.
I
It's
do only from the simple fact that he is the lead actor and
It
is
is,
pretty
sure.
much in every single film. Even if he's
But I
not
wanna
even
segue.
if he's not the producer, we still call a movie a Sean Connery film. Even if Sean Connery is not a producer or director or anything like that, he's the lead actor. Therefore, it's a Sean Connery film. he's the lead actor in this, therefore it is an Andy Samberg movie at the same time.
Right, and his Lonely Island crew were listed as producers on this film. It's definitely got a little bit of their flavor to it. I want to bring this. This is an important segue that you're bringing up because I don't think Andy Samberg playing Niles. You also have the character of Sarah. Those two lead this film, and it is not, in my opinion, I wouldn't brand it as an Andy Samberg led vehicle. What I think leads this film is the concept. I think it is a lot of the writing and the humor that would live on despite Andy Samberg playing this role. I don't think it was written entirely with him as mind. Yeah, they probably did some rewrites and then some, they probably
there were definitely there were a
bit.
lot of rewrites that went in once he was brought on board,
Especially some of the gags. But maybe that kind of brings us more into spoiler territory because I feel like
it does. Is there anything else non-spoiler you kind of want to cover now, or do we need
J.K.
to just
Simmons is in it? That's important because he's fantastic in it.
Well, Peter Gallagher's in it too.
Yes, he is.
Even though he wasn't as prominent of a character as J.K. And Andy, I think, and Cristin, I think that he was still, a very recognizable name, and the parts that he were in was still humorous.
Yeah.
So I think you still had. I think the cast was really strong. I do agree with that.
So let's draw the line now. From here on out, spoilers, because I feel like we're holding back. We're kind of dancing around things. I don't like it.
If you haven't
making
seen
me uncomfortable.
If you haven't seen the movie, please, and you're someone who doesn't like spoilers, please stop this video now. Go watch the movie and come back and watch what everything else we have to say. If you don't care about spoilers, then yeah, keep on watching. I think we definitely need to get in detail here.
Okay. I don't even know where to begin with this. First of all, okay. Let's put aside this Andy Samberg led portion of this film for a moment. Let's talk about the movie as a whole.
Okay.
Tell me. I don't know where we begin here. You got something brewing, and I don't know what it is that you got going on with this film. I want people that are watching this to know that they should be going in and find that it's very enjoyable. Some may find it more funny than others, but I think
I absolutely think it's enjoyable. I don't regret watching this movie. I think others should definitely check the movie out. I think it does provide entertainment and enjoyment. So I don't want to any of the things I do nitpick on as far as what I think about Andy Samberg or some of the other little details that bothered me a little bit. I don't want that to impede anyone. I enjoyed this movie. I did like it. I think I liked it less than you did, and less than some of the other critics did. But I enjoyed the film. I definitely think it was a good movie. It was a fun movie, and there are definite aspects of this movie I liked.
What was the thing that you walked away? Let's start with the dirty stuff here. What was the thing that you walked away with this movie that you just couldn't shake, that just really bothering you? I know it's there. I can feel it.
There wasn't really anything that really, I mean, honestly, it was still Andy Samberg, and it is mainly something about his delivery of the performance. Like most of the other characters and actors, I was totally on board with, but a little bit of just Andy Samberg plays Andy Samberg pretty much in every single movie, right? There's no real chameleon about him in his delivery of his performance, right? Uh-huh. And so honestly, if I was going to change one thing about this movie, it would probably be to put someone else there.
But is it fair to say that the role itself is someone that's kind of boyish, immature, that had to be faced with sort of, all those different stages? You work all your way down the line, you kind of go into a state of almost acceptance / depression. They kind of merge together, and then one leads to eventual acceptance. I feel like it was interesting, and from an Andy Samberg position of actually bringing him onto the film, I thought it was interesting that you have a character that is very immature. He almost gets to a point of just being completely jaded with his situation and just giving up. Who knows how long he's been in that loop? They never really exactly say, but we know it's been a long time. And for this other character to be introduced and go through that with him and kind of see him evolve as a person, I feel like I hear what you're saying, but Andy Samberg, it's almost like this role in a way was kind of meant for him, similarly to the way that Bill Murray's role, that, Groundhog Day was meant for him. Bill Murray wanted Groundhog Day to be much more dramatic. He didn't really get what he wanted until Lost in Translation came out. He wanted to push that to that kind of area because he felt like he was being locked into a certain role. I think it's fair to say that Andy Samberg is also kind of in that place right now in his career. And in my opinion, not saying it took a huge jump. I feel like this role, though, is a kind of way of sort of transitioning. He can go in either direction. I think it proved that he can play that kind of boyish character that eventually figures things out. And to me, it was believable and funny the entire way.
Oh, it was funny, and he definitely does the boyishness. I think where I had trouble with them was actually some of the more dramatic parts. I didn't believe some of the more dramatic moments from him. I mean, as far as like frustration or just kind of acceptance, sure. But when it really got down to like Cristin, or the character of Sarah, absolutely, I felt her ups and downs a hell of a lot more. Now, granted, we're following her through all of them.
Yes,
but
that's important.
We see, I think she did a much better job of a clear delineation between the I'm being silly to I'm being romantic to I'm being very dramatic and serious. I think she pulled off the dividing line between them a whole lot better than Andy did. I think when you got to the dramatic part, I didn't believe him dramatically as well as I believed him as far as this I don't care or I'm being stupid and silly. I believe him in those 100%. I didn't believe him on the dramatic parts nearly as well.
Well, they didn't give him a lot to work with, in my opinion, in that arena either. Because keep in mind, too, like you even said, Sarah's character has the full arc. We only see
But
Niall
at the same time,
if
he's brought in and he's given that creativity to help bring that stuff in, he had the option, in my opinion, probably to influence some of that as well. And
I think to a degree, though, he stayed true to his character. I mean, even at the end, when he gives the big speech about, how he feels about her and what he wants out of his life, he's the one that's drawn to the romance side of it. He's the one that adds, all the punctuation to his entire little speech. It kind of kept sort of the playfulness of the character.
I didn't feel the part I think I would have done better if done differently would probably have been the part where she stopped showing up. And that part where he just kind of goes into a complete slump.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel that as well with him as I would have liked to have felt that.
And I don't know that they give that part of it, maybe Samberg, right? But I think part of it too is the actual structure of the film itself, the pacing of it, because again, it was 90 minutes. They spent a good 45 of them just showing them how they would actually, playfully and
but there
fun time dealing with this.
There was a good chunk there where she stopped showing up, where he had to deal with the time loop again by himself.
Right.
And
he goes to see Roy, J.K. Simmons' character, at some point, which is awesome, by the way.
Right. And I was okay with even that part of it. But up to him going to see, like when she stops showing up to when he goes see J.K., that weight right there that I felt I would have liked to have seen that played differently, or at least more him. I don't know if it's him doing a better job at being more dramatic, or that being written more dramatic, or that was a part that I felt for his character was my weakest part of that movie. Like everything leading up to that, I was fine, and the stuff after it, I was fine. It's that one segment where he really starts to, he comes to the realization of what she truly means to him.
Right.
And the weight of her not being there for him anymore. That was the part that I felt was the weakest for that character for me.
So to be clear, if it weren't for Andy Samberg, this would have probably fallen in line with how much I enjoyed the film and or the audience.
Probably closer. There was a time loop part that I immediately, even while watching it, annoyed me. When we got to the end of the movie, it annoyed me because her whole realization was that, hey, once I blew up the animal, animal stopped being in the time loop. I never saw it again. And I'm like, okay. She said the goat was gone. And that was okay, the goat's gone. So once they get out, they're gone. And so when Andy Samberg is there for JK and he's a version of him that wasn't in a time loop, that makes me think, well, there should have been a version of the goat that wasn't in the time loop in some way.
I
But
could be way off base here, but I'm going to go off a recollection from to kind of throw something at your because it's a good point. But Sarah does say to Niles that it was kind of a window in time that she was experimenting, right? And she kind of made it seem like, and this is by no means verbatim, the timing, whether, and I interpreted it as she blew up this goat. Let's say it was at 3:54 p.m. in the afternoon. If she had done it at 3:58 p.m. in the afternoon, it could have gone differently. But either way, this one window of time, that's when the goat was gone. She just conclusively knew. I don't know. Did they get it down to the minute? I mean, I don't even remember exactly.
They didn't, but it just had to happen.
Yeah.
That's why,
And look,
whether it's during the day or during the night, but it was that concept of the goat's gone. If the goat had still been there, but it was somehow she was able to tell it was a different goat, that would have been would have worked with the, hey, I show up and now there's a version of Niles who knows nothing about the time loop. It was just that little part messed me up because I latched on when they're trying to when she's trying to explain to him about her discovery after learning all this quantum physics. Now the goat's gone. Like, I latched on to the idea the goat's gone. Okay,
right.
So once you do this, you're gone. Because the goat's gone. And so when they do this little part of JK shows up and Niles is there, just not the same version of Niles, I'm like, wait, then there should have been just not the same version of the goat.
Okay, I think I can agree with you on this, and it's as good because I had my defenses up. I thought we were going to go into this whole thing about disgracing and abusing the concept of Groundhog Day or something to that. And I'm glad we're not having that discussion.
No. I actually liked this idea. I got it in my head because they had mentioned the idea of the multiverse and everything like that. I got it in my head that pretty much every time the loop starts over, that's a new reality. Like, that keeps going, even though they get their consciousness wraps back around, that whatever they did just keeps on going. And their version of themselves just keeps on going as well. Their consciousness gets to just start back over again. So I was okay with okay, we're going multiverse all the way across every time it's a new reality. They're just having a hard time of getting out of it, not starting back over, right?
But even without that, I don't think that makes it what I hear you.
I would have been fine with that idea of then there's a new version of Niles that doesn't know it if she hadn't said, hey, the goat's gone.
No, because I want to go to this goat thing because I think you make an interesting point I hadn't really considered. But I want to point out that for anyone that hasn't, or I'm gonna say that hasn't seen that, if you've been watching up to this point, there's a lot of things you have seen I'm questioning, and there's a lot of things you haven't seen that it doesn't make any sense why you are watching this. But I want to point out that regarding the Groundhog Day concept, you mentioned one thing that makes it maybe in your view distinctly different than Groundhog Day, the fact that these characters are continuing to live on even though their consciousness keeps looping. There's other forms of Niles and Sarah and the rest of everybody else that just continue to live on, whether that version that we're watching realizes it or not. What I think makes it stand out, and I think it's been said by those involved in the film itself, and I appreciate, is that I don't like the idea of taking a concept and saying that a particular film or a particular, director, writer, what have you, owns that concept. Sure, there are exceptions to that, but in my opinion, obviously that's not the case in the world of, Edge of Tomorrow or Live, Die, Repeat, whatever they did with that, or even to some degree like 50 First Dates or something where you're just kind of looping a story. With that said, I like the idea of that there's two things they were smart with. One, let's bring two people into this, and how would a relationship work in that environment? And two, where we're both actually remembering it and experiencing it, with full consciousness. And two, if with that happening, two people going through it, I love the idea of one character meeting the other character while they're midway through this whole nightmarish ordeal, if you want to put it that way. And I thought that was really cool, and it made it a very unique playground to go with. And I like that we don't have to sit here and have debates on whether or not Groundhog Day is the true,
No, no.
the you know
Groundhog Day just started playing with time in a rom com type of atmosphere, right? Because there's still Groundhog Day is still a rom com, right? It's just one of
right,
the first ones, one of the early big popular blowout ones to play with time in a rom com, right? You've
sure.
had others since then, obviously. 51st Date isn't really so much playing with time as much as is, Drew
I'm just talking
Barrymore's
about the
character,
concept of
right?
looping. Yeah.
Right. And you had a movie about time where you had, a character who could travel through time. So he kept
Hmm.
going back in time to alter the events. So
Hmm.
you've had other rom coms that played with time, some in a more serious way or another. Now, one of the things I did like about this was the fact that there is an ambiguity to this film, to a certain extent of, we have no idea really what happens now for them. Are they
Right.
because we don't see them like wake up in the new day. We just know that they're now in the next day. So we really don't
Yeah.
know what actually, how did they end up in the pool? Did they end up somewhere else? How did that actually go? So there's some
Sure.
ambiguity there. Um, and there's the ambiguity of we have no idea what's going to happen for these characters going forward. All we know is they've made it out of the loop and they like each other. So we don't ever get, do they make it? Does one of their defeatist attitude about marriage and relationships actually come true? Do they actually live happily ever? We know none of that, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I like the ambiguity, and to a certain extent, everyone gets to read into it kind of the way they want. Same with
And I
the
think,
the dinosaurs at the end, right? You
yeah.
kind of get to write that into however you want. Now, I read that the original writer of this always wanted, Jurassic Park was kind of their launching point of movies and
Yes.
wanting to make movies. And so the dinosaurs were just, saw an opportunity to throw dinosaurs in a movie and they jumped at it.
Hmm.
But at the same time, having them at the end again allows somebody to add their own interpretation into it. And
Right.
I like that ambiguity. I've liked that in other things I've watched where you get to interpret it yourself, and they'll never tell you like, Andy's view at the end of how he thinks things go, and Kristin's view at the end of how things go, and the writer, everyone's got their own version of what they think happens, and I love the fact that everyone's got their own version. Right? There'll probably never be a sequel to this because they wouldn't
No.
want to ruin that ambiguity.
No, I think like any film in its own contained, what we saw is what we got. We saw the characters evolve. I'm not worried about how they lived on after that. I like the overall arc. I like the character, how they went from one place to another. I like how they got there throughout all this. I feel like one thing I want to quickly, because we kind of got away from this goat thing, but I'm going to make this quick, and then I'm going to close with one little nitpick thing on my end, because as much as I did like this film, there's one thing I felt was a little clunky. The goat thing, first of all, because I think that was a really good point. One thing that I could throw out there, and I feel like I lean towards more your side, because it if it had been a much more inconsequential scene, I don't know that I would have cared as much. But when you started to put it the way you did, I thought back to it and I was like, that was an important scene, because whether we thought of it or not, after those credits rolled, we were like, wait a minute, what about Roy? Whatever happened with that? So we had to answer that question. So they answered that question by putting that out there. And the very scene that you're talking about, where all of a sudden we're like, how did that work? You made a pretty important, like, sort of definitive moment for a resolution for this Roy character, and it does kind of create this. Wait a minute, how does there an alternate Niles when there's no alternate goat in this reality? I could throw out there, and this is way out there, and this is probably to illustrate the point that maybe we shouldn't be thinking about it, is that
It's open to
maybe
interpretation.
maybe the Niles that we saw throughout that film played that whole gag on him the entire time, and it was just like a callback to a moment right before he was about to blow up the cave. I doubt it, but I'm just saying there are some possibilities, right? And it maybe is just exactly that, leaving it up to interpretation. But I do think it's a valid point. My nitpick, that was yours. Mine, and this is more from an overall story element standpoint, was I felt like the cave aspect was almost unnecessary. Like, I'm all for the kind of out there supernatural elements. I mean, that's the whole nature of this sort of a story anyway. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, Groundhog Day did this. But the cave, almost like, what was the, other than blowing it up, I guess you had to have this one singular thing, and that ultimately needed to lead to that. So maybe that is it. But I just felt like it being a part of all this, like you almost had to throw this in, like the day is going to loop whether you die or whether you go in this cave. And I'm like, why do we need this cave? I mean, other than maybe making it different than Groundhog Day, I don't know that it was necessary to do that because there were other things that they did that accomplished that. So it's like that cave to me almost, and honestly, if anything, it just kind of exposed a little bit of, in my opinion, under below average sort of CGI. We just
Well,
didn't even need that.
the CGI wasn't good, but I think that was fine because I think they did at least set it up on the aspect of there was an earthquake that unveiled it. That's why no one had stumbled on this before, and they
Right.
blow it up that day. So in theory, nobody hopefully is going to. But obviously, someone else could still experience because she blew it up with the goat, and the thing was still there. Um,
Yeah,
so
I feel like I could have accepted if the cave was the true source, but it wasn't. It kind of was, and it kind of wasn't. It was the one thing that changed everything. I understand that,
the
but they could have
one
done that with almost anything. It could
The
have been
one
a
other
freaking rock.
non-time related nitpick I do want to hit real quick, and it's with the character of Sarah, was I thought it was too predictable that she was sleeping with her sister's fiance. Like as soon as they said she wasn't in her room, where were you? And she goes, I went for a hike or whatever. As soon as they said that, it's like, oh, she wasn't in her room, she was in someone else's. She was sleeping with her sister's fiance. I felt like
I
that
was
was
not paying enough attention because that caught me off guard. I'll be honest.
I felt like that was so telegraphed. I would have
Yeah.
loved for her to have been sleeping with anybody else, like that
Yeah.
annoying guy or the DJ. Ended
Right.
up being she slept with the same guy, that his Niall's girlfriend ends up ultimately cheating on him with. There's
And he
some
took coke from, and
any
or no, that was the
almost
officiant. Yeah.
right, almost anybody else. I would have.
Yeah.
It was like that is way too telegraphed that you were sleeping. You set the character up as someone who sleeps around, so of course she slept with her sister's fiance. I felt like that was. I think that on such a creative film, because I do consider this to be very creative and to take a lot of turns that were a little unexpected. I felt like that was too telegraphed for me. That was too cliche.
I can accept that, and I think that's a testament to kind of maybe wrap this up. I think that's a testament to this film in general. I think there were enough twists, there were enough unexpected moments, both from a humor standpoint and from a plot standpoint, that there were some of those moments. Like in my opinion, the cave was just kind of it was just there. It made no sense to me that it was even necessary, and some of these moments that you're talking about, especially with Sarah waking up in her soon-to-be brother-in-law's hotel room. You expect more when everything else is going so well. So I'm going to walk away from this, and I'm going to say that I think this is a great, I would even say a great summer film.
Oh yeah,
Right?
absolutely, fun movie.
So
I think it worked. I don't know if it would have worked direct in the theaters. I think it works direct to streaming. But at the same time, had it been in the theaters, I think it would have created enough conversation that it would have gotten people who may not have gone to the theater to see it to go see it. So
Yeah.
I do think, but it's very much one of those things of, I think once the buzz got out, there would be spoilers and so some of the magic would be immediately gone. So I think it worked just dropping it and saying, hey, everyone watch it.
yeah,
So, but I do think it had enough uniqueness to it that it could have created buzz that had it been in the theater, it may have exceeded expectations. I'm not saying it would have been a runaway blockbuster movie, but I think it may have exceeded expectations because it would have created enough thought or buzz that could have said, hey, you should go check out this movie. Because again,
I think it would have been a relatively limited release nationwide, and it would have gotten some legs,
Right.
especially over the summer. I think it would have done well. I'd recommend it to anyone, especially if you enjoy comedies. Apparently, if you can tolerate Andy Samberg, you're really going to enjoy it. And that's my closing remark, at least.
All right, my closing remark is I admit I have a bias going in, so please disregard my bias. There are a few actors...
Or regard it if you really love Andy Samberg.
Right. I admit there are a few actors that just don't rub me the right way. He's one of them, so I'm hesitant sometimes because of those actors. He's just one of them. All right, so I think that's it. If you enjoyed this video, I know I think our original plan is to make this a brief video, but it was a good conversation. Hopefully you enjoyed it as well. If you're still watching, if you are, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and take it easy.
Andy Samberg's all right. He's all right.
If you say so.